Good morning, students. Welcome back to P.N.AMERSEY e-learning classes. Students, this is the third part of chapter number 11, that is force and pressure. So let's start chapter number 11. So let's begin our video with the topic types of force. There are 5 common types of forces which we notice every day, and they are: first one is muscular force, second one is frictional force, third one is magnetic force, fourth one is electrostatic force, and last one is gravitational force. All type of forces can be divided into two main groups. First one is contact forces and second one is non-contact forces. Students, please note that the state of one object physically touching another object is known as contact. It means when we physically touch an object, that means contact. So, when one object physically touches another object, they are said to be in contact. A force can act on an object with or without being in contact with it. We will now describe contact forces and non-contact forces in detail one by one. Let's start with contact force. A force which can be exerted by an object on another object only through physical touching is called contact force. The examples of contact forces are: first one is muscular force and second one is frictional force, or we can say friction. Let's begin with the muscular force. Suppose a book is lying on a table. To lift this book from the table, some force is required. When we lift this book from the table by hand, the force is exerted by the muscles of our arm. Similarly, when we kick a football, the force is exerted by the muscles of our leg. The force exerted by the muscles of the body is called muscular force. Both human beings and animals exert muscular force to do work. The human beings exert muscular force for performing the various day-to-day activities like walking, running, jumping, climbing, lifting, pushing, pulling, kicking, stretching, squeezing, twisting, and pressing the objects. A boy pushing a cart on a road, a potter carrying a load on a wheelbarrow, a child riding a bicycle, and a person drawing water from a well are all examples of the use of muscular force. It is the muscular force which enables us to perform all the activities involving the movement or bending of our body parts. Since muscular force can be applied to an object only when our body or body of an animal is in contact with the object, therefore, muscular force is a contact force. For example, when we lift a book from a table by applying muscular force, then our hand is in contact with the book. We cannot lift a book from the table without touching it. Our contact or that of an animal with an object for applying muscular force can also be through a stick or a piece of rope, etc. For example, when we hit a hockey ball, we apply muscular force to ball through the hockey stick. And when we draw a bucket of water from a well, then we apply the muscular force through a rope tied to the bucket. Students, these are some pictures that shows the muscular force. Another contact force is frictional force. A ball moving on the ground slows down gradually and stops after covering some distance. We know that a force is required to stop a moving body. This means that a force is exerted by the ground on the moving ball which opposes its motion and brings it to a stop. This force which opposes the motion of ball on the ground is known as frictional force. We can define the frictional force as the force which always opposes the motion of one body over another body is called frictional force, or simply we can say a friction. The frictional force acts between the two surfaces which are in contact with each other. A ball moving on the ground slows down and then stops due to the frictional force between the ball and the ground. In this case, the two surfaces in contact are the surfaces of the ground and the surface of the ball. Frictional force is also known as force of friction or just friction. I will give you some example from everyday life where frictional force is involved. If we stop pedaling a running bicycle, it slows down gradually and stops after covering some distance. The bicycle moving on the road slows down and finally comes to a stop due to the frictional force between the tires of the bicycle and the road. This frictional force opposes the motion of bicycle and brings it to a stop. In this case, the two surfaces in contact are the surface of the road and the surface of tire of bicycle. Another example is when we stop rowing a boat which is moving in water, it slows down and then stops. The boat moving in water slows down and finally stops due to the frictional force between the boat and the water. The frictional force always acts on all the moving objects and its direction is always opposite to the direction of motion. Since frictional force arises only when the two surfaces are in touch with each other, therefore frictional force is an example of a contact force. Students, these are some examples of frictional force. You must see all these pictures very carefully, then you will be able to understand what is shown in these pictures. We have studied contact forces like muscular force and frictional force in this video. Tomorrow we will study non-contact forces like electrostatic force and gravitational force. Up till then, thank you and goodbye.